Extinction didn't erase their terror. In fact, it sealed their legacy in blood and bone. For over 600 million years, our Earth served as a proving ground for predators, with nature constantly the rules of survival. I find myself thinking about the Smilodon, initially mistaken for a hyena because of its similar cheek teeth, but later revealed to be a unique and massive feline predator. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild at the top of the food chain. Life at the top has its perks, but even the most fearsome hunters aren't always the biggest beasts around. When it comes to the predator game, size isn't everything. Yet every so often, nature outdoes itself, creating a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game that it seems almost like a creature of myth. These rare beasts develop weapons tailored specifically for tackling the giants of their time. Not too long ago, just a blink of an eye in Earth's timeline, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat, but the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age, the Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. With its iconic saber teeth and fierce appearance, Smilodon is one of the most instantly recognizable extinct predators, a status only solidified by its portrayal in popular films like Ice Age. But while the world knows it as a saber-toothed cat, it didn't start out that way. Rewind the clock about 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with a discovery that would perplex the scientific community. When the first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. In fact, their initial guess was way off the mark. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new-find hyena Neogaea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which, by the way, seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of felid, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon populator was born. Smilodon, meaning knife tooth, and populator, roughly translating to the destroyer or he who brings devastation. If you're thinking that sounds like the title of a heavy metal album, you're not wrong. And it's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers, or any living cats for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontinii, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontidae lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table. S. gracilis, S. fatalis, and S. populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch, but they did have their differences. First up, we have S. gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Megafauna. Next came S. fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today. But S. populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, you were in equal danger. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to see a Smilodon in the flesh. They weren't just large, they were built like prehistoric tanks. Their heel bone alone was a marvel of natural engineering, robust and elongated. Some paleontologists even speculate these Ice Age acrobats could have outleaped modern lions, clearing heights of 15 feet or 4.5 meters, and their athletic prowess didn't stop there. If modern big cats have arms that could crush you, Smilodon's forelimbs were on another level entirely, about 20% thicker than you'd expect for a cat of its size. This gave it incredible strength, surpassing even that of the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, Smilodon was armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved. Those claws were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of Smilodon size, twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear, an animal that can weigh twice as much. They weren't just weapons. They were nature's equivalent of grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. But, of course, when we think of Smilodon, it's those teeth that come to mind, those iconic, impossibly long canines that have captured imaginations for generations. Saber-teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has experimented with this dental design in various mammals, and even some non-mammals, throughout history. But Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to an entirely new level. What made Smilodon's fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches or 20 centimeters long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction, shaped like deadly daggers with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where things get really interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match, but studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, only about 1,000 newtons, which is 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? Well, that's been a subject of much debate among paleontologists. One popular theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. I picture it hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim and sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone buys this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different but equally grim scenario. They propose that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise, lethal bite to the throat. This would have caused severe blood loss and suffocation, a quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon's skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils showed trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk life and limb, or at least a bruised chest, in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter, capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today: giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Litopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodon lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. The La Brea tar pits, I've always found them a bit haunting. Imagine being a massive herbivore, maybe a bison or a ground sloth, wandering onto what looks like solid ground, only to find yourself hopelessly trapped. But what's even more unsettling is the thought of the predators who met the same fate, drawn in by the promise of an easy meal, only to become entombed themselves. Smilodon fossils are the second most common find in these pits. Over 166,000 bones. That staggering number has led some scientists to wonder if these saber-toothed cats were social animals. The theory goes that, like modern social cats, they might have been responsive to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon got stuck, its cries for help could have attracted others, leading them to the same sticky end. It's a grim image, but one that might explain the sheer number of remains found in one place. There's another surprisingly touching clue suggesting possible social behavior. Touching in a prehistoric, slightly morbid kind of way. Some Smilodon fossils show signs of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting almost impossible. And yet, these individuals survived well into adulthood. Some paleontologists call it pseudo-health care. The idea is that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like modern lions or wolves, support injured members of their pride or pack. One famous fossil shows a Smilodon with hip dysplasia from a young age, an injury that it somehow survived. It's hard to imagine how such an animal could have hunted alone. It leads to a heartwarming, if speculative, image of Smilodon families caring for their own. Of course, not everyone buys the Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps tend to be more isolated. They argue that this points to a more solitary lifestyle, like many modern big cats. Whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, it was definitely at the top of the food chain, but it wasn't without competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of its biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, the dire wolves weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts, but they were formidable predators. Isotope analysis shows their diet was very similar to Smilodons. In other words, they were often competing for the same prey. When it came to the American lion, it was probably a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats ever. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a deterrent. Most likely, they tried to avoid each other, but when conflicts occurred, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from the La Brea tar pits suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to imagine why, given those sabers being on full display. most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor. Lions and wolves weren't the only competition. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions, rivaling medium-sized sauropods in weight. However, these giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. We've talked a lot about Smilodon's hunting adaptations, but how on earth did it eat with those teeth? Those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats and even other predators use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator envious. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread, it was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodons, the rhino-like toxodons, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to walk those ancient Ice Age landscapes. Not the picturesque scenes we see in documentaries, but the brutal reality. It was like a real-life version of the ice levels in every video game, but with 100% more lethal prehistoric cats. And then there were the humans, our ancestors. It's believed that they first crossed paths with Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Imagine being one of those early humans, armed with nothing but primitive tools, coming face to face with a saber-toothed cat. The relationship between humans and Smilodon was likely a tense one. We were competing for many of the same food sources. Unfortunately for our ancestors, by the time humans arrived on the scene, only the larger populator and fatalis remained. Talk about bad timing. Given that Meganterion, the possible predecessor of Smilodon, was known to occasionally prey on Homo erectus, it's not a stretch to imagine that Smilodon might have considered early humans as potential prey too. But don't feel too bad for our ancestors. Humans are nothing if not resourceful. While there's no direct evidence yet of human Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables on these prehistoric predators from time to time. In fact, in 2021, researchers discovered something truly extraordinary, a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. But as we all know, this coexistence was not to last. Somewhere between then and now, Smilodon disappeared from the face of the earth. The youngest remains of both fatalis and populator date back to around 10,000 years ago, roughly the same time that humans in some parts of the world were figuring out this cool new thing called agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon is a topic that continues to fuel debate among paleontologists. Some researchers argue that humans played a significant role in their demise, either through direct competition or by altering habitats through practices like fire starting. Others, however, are less convinced of humanity's impact. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader quaternary extinction event as the primary culprit. This was a period of significant climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. In a cruel twist of fate, the very adaptations that had made Smilodon such a successful hunter of large prey now became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was, in essence, too good at what it did. And when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy, however, still resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, towering 11 feet tall, wrapped in shaggy armor, and tipping the scales at 6 tons. But here's the uncomfortable truth. They weren't the scariest things out there. Not even close. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint. A beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it had, all it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise, that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibericum, the creature that should have defined Ice Age dominance from the very beginning. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't nearly intimidating enough. Now, multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of an elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized. Standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail, Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. The horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I've spent years studying the megafauna of the Pleistocene epoch, and there's one creature that never fails to fascinate me: Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another oversized herbivore struggling to survive the Ice Age. It was purpose-built for that brutal world. Imagine a 5-ton animal charging at you with the force of a freight train. That was Elasmotherium. Unlike mammoths, which were essentially oversized elephants struggling in the frozen conditions, Elasmotherium was truly optimized for the harsh realities of that world. Take its legs, for example. They were both powerful and surprisingly agile, not just weight-bearing supports like the mammoth's thick pillar-like limbs. They were the foundation of a charging mechanism that could accelerate tons of muscle and bone into a thundering full-speed collision, capable of flattening anything in its path. Mammoths carried their weight relatively evenly, but Elasmotherium's mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic impact. This wasn't accidental. It was millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into one purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone were powerful enough to absorb the shock of high-speed collisions that would have shattered the bones of lesser creatures. Critically, Elasmotherium had solved the fundamental problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. While mammoths required vast quantities of vegetation to fuel their massive bodies, Elasmotherium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation that dominated the frozen steppes. It wasn't just surviving, it was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to creatures with more delicate cranial architecture. This wasn't just about protection, it was about turning the entire head into a weapon system. When Elasmotherium charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat. It was the entire front end of the creature functioning as an organic siege engine. Compare this to the mammoth's approach to survival, which largely relied on group protection and intimidation through size. Elasmotherium needed no such social strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare and a territorial competitor's worst enemy, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth and protection, Elasmotherium stood alone because nothing else on the frozen landscape posed a credible threat. And then there was the horn. It transformed Elasmotherium from merely impressive to genuinely legendary. At up to 6 feet in length and potentially weighing as much as 100 pounds, this wasn't some decorative display piece. This was a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and presumably any creature unfortunate enough to challenge its owner. That's a horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, attached to a creature that could wield it with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, Elasmotherium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. This placement meant that when the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 miles per hour. The physics alone are genuinely frightening, but the horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis of its structure suggests it served multiple functions that gave Elasmotherium distinct advantages over its contemporaries. The base was broad and sturdy enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas that would have been inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce and competition was fierce, this ability to access buried vegetation was literally a matter of life and death. The horn's surface was likely covered in keratin, the same material that makes up our fingernails, but structured for maximum durability. This covering would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring that the weapon remained effective throughout the creature's lifetime. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool of destruction. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long, weapons that would have made the creature's intimidation factor approach the genuinely absurd. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, creatures that were accustomed to being the apex predators of their respective environments, suddenly encountering something that could quite literally impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how Elasmotherium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live, constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began. The silence surrounding the extinction of Elasmotherium is genuinely haunting. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, its disappearance feels almost deliberate. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's as if something erased them from the archaeological record. This creature, built like a living battering ram, thrived in a paradise of occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland. No dense forests to navigate, no steep terrain, just endless expanses where speed, power, and intimidation ruled. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving where other megafauna couldn't, in the frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia. These were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds, territories where extreme cold, sparse vegetation and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. Their secret was in their resource management. Mammoth herds needed vast areas and constant movement to find enough food. Elasmotherium operated differently. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with aggressive efficiency, making migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. During the harshest periods of the Ice Age, when food became scarce, mammoth herds had to keep moving, burning precious calories. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation, defend prime feeding areas, and maintain energy reserves that migrating species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of prosperity. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range from Ukraine to Mongolia, suggesting successful territorial expansion, not desperate wandering. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. Unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable. This wasn't luck. It was a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to environmental press that devastated other megafauna. But for a creature so perfectly adapted, so dominant, so well-equipped, Elasmotherium's extinction is a perplexing mystery. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths survived in various forms until about 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't gradual. It was a sudden, complete disappearance, leaving no descendants and few clues. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but that has problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, warming periods, and environmental shifts. Why would this particular shift prove fatal? Some suggest human hunting prey, but the evidence doesn't quite add up. We're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns. Even with primitive weapons, hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show stress markers and nutritional deficiencies, suggesting the final populations were struggling. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear, but collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure, and yet it vanished with barely a trace. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted, perhaps simply more fortunate. Elasmotherium wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was the pinnacle of prehistoric power, a creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined dominance. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether, bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When I envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus ingens, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters, or around 5 feet tall when upright, and weighing up to 150 kilograms, or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominoid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papioninae, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938, when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus ingens based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great, Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and ingens, meaning huge in Latin, a fitting title for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone meet up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized post-cranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt that this was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened, and Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to face down a Dinopithecus, not just its lone strength, more than enough to crush bone, but the very real possibility of facing many of them. A defensive circle of 10 to 20 large-bodied primates, bristling with muscle and rage, that would have deterred even large carnivores, or, for that matter, early hominins. This wasn't a creature that backed down easily, it simply didn't need to. During the Pleistocene era, when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. These changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities for a primate of its exceptional size. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable, ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites where Dinopithecus remains have been found suggest it inhabited a mosaic landscape of open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life in Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies. Adult males asserted their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Some males weighed up to 150 kilos. These clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilograms of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. While plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope or the young of larger prey animals weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papianins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established. Brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's Cradle of Humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilograms. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilos, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilos, armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength. Even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous, with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, Both would have sought out the same high-value food resources: fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the dire wolf, even its ancient Greek name, terrible wolf, sends a shiver down my spine to think of a creature so dominant, so ferocious, that even mammoths trembled. It's a chilling thought. With jaws capable of tearing through flesh and bone with ease, it truly earned its fearsome reputation. I've often wondered about the press that shaped early hominids. Faced with mega monkeys like Dinopithecus, our ancestors may have been forced to become more resourceful, developing tools and strengthening social bonds. The ability to crack nuts, dig for tubers, or coordinate group defense would have been crucial for survival. The predator dynamics are also fascinating. Dinopithecus and early hominins shared habitats, and thus shared threats from the same array of carnivores: big cats, hyenas, and crocodiles. It's conceivable that a troop of Dinopithecus might have inadvertently protected nearby hominins simply by being too much trouble for a predator to engage. Conversely, a small group of hominins might have attracted predators, which could then spill over to the Dinopithecus. But Dinopithecus eventually vanished around 1.6 to 1.8 million years ago. Climate change likely played a significant role, with expanding grasslands and shrinking woodlands disrupting their food supply and shelter. Competition from more adaptable baboons, favored by the shifting environments, likely contributed as well, and the rise of Homo erectus added new press, more advanced tools, broader diets, and overlapping ecological needs likely intensified resource competition. Predation dynamics may have shifted too, with emerging carnivores increasing risks, particularly for the young. Even disease might have played a part. Socially cohesive species are often vulnerable to outbreaks. Ultimately, the very traits that made Dinopithecus successful, large size, slow reproduction, and dietary specialization, may have left it exposed. Its extinction echoes a broader trend of large-bodied species disappearing during the Pleistocene epoch, not in a sudden collapse, but through gradual decline under mounting press. And what of the dire wolf? These apex predators were renowned for their meat-centric diet and intimidating hunting skills. Their unique dental features, like distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests, set them apart from other wolf species. Their digestive systems were tailored for processing meat, with short intestines optimized for their carnivorous diet. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chests hinted at their strength and prowess in hunting, and their incredible bite force, among the strongest of any canid, enabled them to take down formidable prey with remarkable efficiency. Dire wolves prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America and the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison antiquus, Pleistocene horses like Equus scotti, and large ground sloths such as Megalonyx. In South America, they feasted on a variety of prey, including large ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camelids like Hemialkinia. And in the eastern Asian steppes, they faced formidable opponents like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. Amidst fierce competition with other predators like Xenokion, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear, dire wolves fought fiercely for dominance in the food chain. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores, showcasing their dominance by outnumbering gray wolves 5-1 and demonstrating resilience in challenging environments. Living in monogamous pairs and hunting in packs, dire wolves displayed fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics revealed insights into their evolutionary prowess and survival instincts. With their impressive ability to hunt a wide range of prey, adaptability, and ferocity, as well as their versatility in diverse environments, the dire wolf truly stood as a ruler of the food chain. The origin of the dire wolf has been a topic of debate among scientists, with two conflicting theories proposed. One suggests an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia gave rise to the dire wolf. The other posits that the dire wolf emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Recent advancements in genetic analysis have shed new light on this question. Back in 1992, scientists attempted to extract mitochondrial DNA from the skeletal remains of Anociandirus gilda, a close relative of modern wolves. However, they were thwarted by tar residue from the La Brea pits that stubbornly clung to the bone material. It wasn't until 2021 that scientists finally obtained nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils spanning thousands of years. These groundbreaking discoveries revealed that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines a staggering 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. In comparing dire wolves and gray wolves, despite the similarity in their skeletal structures, they are not closely related. This is attributed to convergent evolution, wherein different species develop similar traits independently. Dire wolves stand out as a unique species within the canine world, distinct from modern gray wolves. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. It all began with the arrival of the canid family in North America. From fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini, the diverse branches of their family tree showcase such intriguing variations. Dire wolf fossils have turned up in so many different habitats across North and South America. Plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, even arid savannas. I find myself imagining these creatures adapting to such diverse conditions. The most fossil-abundant areas are the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and the Tula Springs in Nevada. Though dire wolf remains are less common at higher latitudes in North America, recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils challenge previous theories about their range. Fossils have been reported in various states, with major sites located east of the Rocky Mountains. They've also been uncovered in various locations across Mexico, particularly in the San Josecito Cave and El Cedazo, and in South America, with specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago in Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China back in 2020 suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia. It really challenges assumptions about barriers to their dispersal. When I look at their physical characteristics, it sheds light on their remarkable adaptations and behaviors. The dire wolf, similar in proportions to modern North American wolves like the Yukon wolf and northwestern wolf, exhibited variations in size and morphology. Some dire wolf specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than the largest northern wolves we see today, but others were actually larger. The dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head compared to modern wolves of similar body size, with a massive skull characterized by broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences existed too. Specimens from California and Mexico show distinct cranio-dental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Some had shorter and lighter limbs, making them less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while others possessed longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. Imagine, 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth, when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today, during the Sangamonian interglacial period. Then came the Wisconsin glacial period, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, the Ice Age with glaciers covering much of North America. Dire wolves went extinct around 9,500 years ago. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes without genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction remain debated, likely involving factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family and potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 and 9,500 years ago, significant climatic shifts occurred, shaping the environment in which they lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced their survival. They existed in diverse habitats, ranging from grasslands to forests, adapting to various environmental conditions. As apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems, impacting the populations of herbivores and smaller predators. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity and disrupted ecological balances established over millennia. While interbreeding is known among wolf-like canines, studies have found no evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for their extinction remain a subject of debate, with factors such as climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability, likely playing a role. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force really captivate my imagination. And it makes me think of other creatures that have risen and fallen throughout Earth's history. In the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years, shaping ecosystems and adapting into a myriad of forms that continue to captivate our imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. Enter the forest racids, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors and proving that nature abhors a vacuum, especially when it comes to apex predators. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place, a hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter or 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork, hardly the stuff of nightmares. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. Little did the other inhabitants of ancient South America know. I often think about the terror birds, imagining the shock of early European mammals when these exotic predators first appeared. It must have brought a taste of South American terror to the Old World. It's easy to forget that for millions of years, nature seemed to have grand plans for this lineage of avian predators, and those plans involved getting bigger, much bigger. Just 3 million years after Paleopsilus took its first steps, a new player entered the scene: Eleuthernis, a terror bird that stood 50% taller than its ancestor. But Eleuthernis wasn't content with merely growing in size. It also expanded its range in a way that no other terror bird would match. While most of its kin remained firmly rooted in the Americas, Eleuthernis spread its wings and ventured across the sea to Europe. Fossil remains of this globe-trotting terror have been found in both France and Switzerland, making it the only known member of its family to have lived outside the New World. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds continued to grow, adapt, and diversify, almost as if they were engaged in a relentless competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. The Oligocene epoch, spanning from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point in the terror bird saga. It was during this time that the family truly began to live up to its name with the emergence of giants that would have given pause to even the bravest of prey, the Paraphosaurus. This Brazilian bird was an absolute behemoth that stood 1.4 meters or 4.5 feet tall and tipped the scales at a whopping 180 kilograms, or 400 pounds. To put that into perspective, Paraphosaurus outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This was no lightweight contender. Paraphosaurus was built like a feathered tank with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe that Paraphosaurus hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak, a hunting style that might remind one of a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. Paraphosaurus wasn't just a mindless brute. Like many of its terror bird kin, it likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. As impressive as Paraphosaurus was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, spanning from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family, creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. Three names stand out in this pantheon of avian terrors: Titanus, Kelenken, and Bruntornis. Each of these genera represents the pinnacle of the terror bird lineage, and each had its own claim to fame. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus had grander ambitions. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. Unlike most of its relatives, this bird lived in what is now the United States, including the states of Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters or 6.6 feet tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pliocene horse or ground sloth, accustomed to watching out for saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator, half bird, half nightmare. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters, or 9.8 feet tall, and weighed around 250 kilograms, or 550 pounds. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Speaking of its head, recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that set them apart from their smaller relatives. Known as the terror bird skull type, this adaptation gave them increased bite force and pecking power, suggesting that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. But the title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Bruntornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters or 9.2 feet, Bruntornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms, or 880 pounds. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time and the 4th heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Bruntornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird lineage, the terror birds. I've always found that name so evocative, so dramatic. But the reality of these creatures was even more fascinating than the moniker suggests. I'm not just talking about size, though some species were truly enormous, capable of steamrolling over any prey. What I find most interesting is that while some giant terror birds relied on brute force, others evolved into something quite different: speed demons. Studies of terror bird leg bones reveal a structure remarkably similar to that of modern ostriches. Short thigh bones paired with elongated lower leg and foot bones. It's a clear indicator of high-speed running ability. Paleontologists estimate that many terror birds, including some of the larger species like Titanus, could have reached speeds exceeding 30 mph, that's faster than Usain Bolt, while standing twice as tall and weighing several times as much. But speed wasn't just about chasing down prey. For many terror birds, especially the smaller and medium-sized species, it was also a crucial defensive adaptation. In a world filled with other large predators, including giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, the ability to make a quick getaway could mean the difference between life and death. This combination of speed and size made terror birds versatile predators capable of adapting to a variety of hunting strategies. Smaller, faster species might have specialized in chasing down swift prey like small mammals and reptiles, while the larger, more powerful species could have employed ambush tactics or even taken on larger, more dangerous quarry. While their imposing size and fearsome beaks often steal the spotlight, the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of terror bird skulls and brain cases have revealed that these prehistoric predators were equipped with sensory capabilities that put them leagues ahead of many of their contemporaries. While terror birds might not have had eyesight quite as sharp as modern raptors like eagles or hawks, they were far from being visually impaired. Their eyes were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception, a crucial advantage for any predator. But what really set terror bird vision apart was its versatility. These birds were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and in the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. As for their hearing, the inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This ability would have allowed them to detect the footsteps and movements of potential prey, even when hidden by dense vegetation. Imagine a terror bird standing motionless in the prehistoric forests of South America, its head cocked slightly to one side. To a casual observer, it might appear to be resting or even dozing. But in reality, every fiber of its being is alert, its incredibly sensitive ears picking up the faintest rustle of leaves or the softest patter of tiny feet. In an instant, it can pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. This combination of visual and auditory prowess made terror birds the complete predatory package. It's no wonder these birds were able to dominate their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers faced their downfall, and the reign of the terror birds was no exception. For millions of years, these avid predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species that filled various ecological niches. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, a major paleozoographic event that occurred about 2.7 million years ago. This event saw the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, creating a land bridge between North and South America. As a result, animals from both continents were able to migrate across this newly formed connection, leading to a significant reshuffling of fauna. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America, including cats, dogs, and bears, outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their eventual extinction. It was a neat and tidy explanation that seemed to make perfect sense. However, as is often the case in science, the truth has turned out to be more complex and nuanced. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to the terror bird's downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their main South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanus successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change in particular may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open grasslands. The idea that terror birds, these feathered giants, might have survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America, it stays with me. Imagine our ancestors hearing stories, whispers of these creatures passed down through generations. It's not entirely far-fetched. While some terror birds may have adapted to the open grasslands, others would have struggled. The larger, more specialized species in particular might have found it difficult to find enough prey to sustain their massive bodies in these changing environments. Meanwhile, the influx of new competitors from North America, while perhaps not the primary cause of their extinction, would have added additional press to already stressed populations. Despite the challenges they faced, the terror birds proved to be remarkably resilient. For years, I believed that terror birds had gone extinct around 1 million years ago, but recent discoveries have pushed back the date of their extinction much further than previously thought. Some smaller species of terror birds have now been dated to as recently as 96,000 years ago, a mere blink of an eye in geological terms. Even more tantalizing is the discovery of a set of fossils attributed to an unidentified terror bird species in a formation dated to just 18,000 years ago. If confirmed, this would mean that terror birds survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America, which occurred around 15,000 years ago. This revised timeline raises some intriguing questions. How close did humans come to encountering these feathered giants? What would such an encounter have been like? And perhaps most tantalizingly, could there be any truth to the legends of giant birds that persist in the folklore of some South American cultures? While it's unlikely that humans ever directly interacted with terror birds, the possibility that our ancestors might have heard stories of these creatures passed down through generations is not entirely far-fetched. After all, other megafauna that coexisted with early humans, such as woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, left lasting impressions on human culture and mythology. The near miss between humans and terror birds also serves as a poignant reminder of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. It's sobering to think that if the terror birds had managed to hang on for just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. But shifting gears, I find myself thinking about another apex predator. In the thick forests of the past, the Tyrannosaurus rex was the top predator, striking terror into any animal that encountered it. With its seismic movements and razor-sharp teeth, this dinosaur has always been regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. Even today, its reputation endures as the most frightening being to have ever walked the planet. So, just how terrifying was the T-Rex actually? In 1902, in Montana, United States, the first known fragment of a dinosaur skeleton was discovered by Barnum Brown, a paleontologist. This discovery marked the beginning of a new era in dinosaur research, sparking interest among many people in learning more about them. Since then, major finds have offered invaluable information on the morphology, behavior, and scientific significance of Tyrannosaurus rex, particularly the virtually complete specimen Sioux, discovered in South Dakota. Researchers have put together the history of this giant predator and its function as a prominent apex predator all over the late Cretaceous period through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction. T-Rex and other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurini within the family Tyrannosauridae. One of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, Tyrannosaurus rex, represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. Stretching to an insane length, T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 men, a distance rivaling the size of a typical school bus, from the tip of its formidable snout to the end of its tail. If rumors of paleontological speculation hold true, it's possible that certain specimens exceeded the monumental length of 13 mil, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. Yet, T-Rex's magnificence extended beyond its size alone. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine this, an enormously tall creature with two powerful legs bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm with a regal authority. Having acknowledged their immense size, the next big question that comes to mind is how heavy these remarkable creatures were. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, with its skin and flesh covering its massive bones. To put that into perspective, it's similar to the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator, a true testament to the sheer power and bulk of this ancient apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. Though the exact number of tail vertebrae varied, its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head, while pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short, with two clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs, contributing to its imposing stature. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while the hind foot had an arctometatarsalien metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, which is crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex, renowned for its massive size and impressive strength, possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. The skull of Tyrannosaurus rex. It was a marvel of engineering, really. I've spent hours studying the scans, and the fenestrae, those large openings, weren't just about reducing weight. They showcased unique adaptations, like the incredibly wide rear of the skull and that narrow snout, which gave the T-Rex exceptional binocular vision. Those massive bones, fused together, yet filled with air pockets. Pneumatized, they call it. It all contributed to the Tyrannosaurid trend, a bite more powerful than any of its non-Tyrannosaurid relatives. That U-shaped tip on the upper jaw? Ingenious! It allowed the T-Rex to extract more tissue and bone with each bite, even though it did put extra stress on those front teeth. And the teeth themselves. In the upper jaw they had prominent ridges, the tips curling backward like cutting tools. Such distinct heterodonty. The remaining teeth, robust, spaced apart, lethal bananas, someone once called them, and the image stuck with me. In mature T-Rexes, the upper jaw teeth were actually larger than the lower ones, the biggest tooth ever discovered, a staggering 30.5 centimeters long, and all those little openings in both jaws, hinting at sensory functions or maybe attachment points for external structures. It makes you wonder just how sensitive those jaws really were. Of course, when we think of Tyrannosaurus rex, we think of those massive jaws and teeth. But then there are the arms, disproportionately small. For years, we thought they were useless, vestigial. But some now speculate they were anything but useless. Some believe they were deadly weapons for hand-to-hand combat. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley, for example, suggests those little limbs, only about 3 feet long, were lethal. Crescent-shaped claws, sharpened to a razor edge, capable of inflicting deadly injuries on unsuspecting prey. Imagine the T-Rex advancing, that huge head looming, those strong front limbs slashing rapidly, cutting through tissue and muscle with frightening accuracy. It changes how we understand its hunting tactics, doesn't it? No longer useless like wisdom teeth in humans or wings on a flightless bird, but crucial weapons, adding to the terror of this prehistoric apex predator. The movies, Jurassic Park especially, often portray the T-Rex as having poor eyesight. Characters evade it simply by standing still. But recent science suggests otherwise. By comparing anatomy and studying fossil evidence, paleontologists now believe the T-Rex likely had vision comparable to modern predators like hawks, able to detect both moving and stationary objects. It challenges that cinematic depiction, doesn't it? It deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Some even propose the T-Rex was an ambush predator, using its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to hunt swiftly. Others see it as more of a scavenger, feeding on carrion. These differing views, they underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and its ecological role, and they fuel ongoing debates among researchers even now. Beyond its eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex had a remarkable sense of smell, much like modern vultures. That keen olfactory ability. It could spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. And it wasn't just about sensing prey from a distance. The T-Rex was quick. It could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour. That's comparable to Usain Bolt's world record sprinting speed. Imagine yourself wandering in a primeval forest, trying to find your way back to safety. The noises of the woods echo around you, then a tremendous noise stops you in your tracks. The Tyrannosaurus rex is approaching. Your heart races. You sprint, feet pounding the forest floor, desperately trying to escape. But you feel the earth tremble under your feet as the T-Rex closes in. You glance back, see that massive silhouette, those gleaming sharp teeth under the sun's rays. There's no escape. The T-Rex's jaws close with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding habits and diet of the Tyrannosaurus rex, so integral to its dominance during the late Cretaceous period. That massive size, those powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth. It was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large herbivorous dinosaurs like Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, some of the toughest dinosaurs of that time. But sometimes the T-Rex would also prey on other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. Some believe it may have even targeted individuals of its own species or other formidable predators. It really does demonstrate the sheer dominance and terror this apex predator inspired. The Tyrannosaurus rex had a significant impact on its surroundings, far beyond simply being an efficient hunter. Its very presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses, speed, armor, to evade its attacks. Others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, the T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing the ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each with its own unique adaptations and behaviors. There were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Denversaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. The T-Rex's formidable presence characterized by, forget horned helmets and storm-tossed seas. The Vikings faced something far more terrifying. Creatures so colossal and powerful, they seemed ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. And as I've been reading these accounts, I've been struck by the sheer scale of it all. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 1.8 meters or 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made the aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span up to 1 meter or 3.3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools, they were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior, or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 35 kilometers per hour or 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting prey. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaguar-Sized forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines. Colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 75 to 85 centimeters, or 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 35 kilometers per hour or 22 miles per hour. On land, however, They were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on two legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Eldey off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population. The European forest elk, or skogselg, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 2.1 meters or 7 feet at the shoulder with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prey and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose with their uniformly dark coats, Viking era, I sometimes imagine those massive forest elk that once roamed Scandinavia. Cave paintings suggest they had distinctive light patches on their sides and shoulders. It's thought that these markings provided excellent camouflage in the dappled forest light. These weren't the docile creatures we might imagine today. Their behavior was reportedly more aggressive than modern moose, especially during the mating season. Bulls would actively defend their territories, a stark contrast to the competition we see now. For the Vikings, these elk were essential. A single animal could yield over 500 kilos of meat, enough to sustain a small village for weeks during the brutal northern winters. Their hides, far tougher than domestic cattle leather, were prized for shields, boats, and winter clothing, but perhaps most valued were their enormous antlers. Viking craftsmen transformed them into everything from tools and weapons to drinking horns for feasts and kings. By the late Viking Age, however, these forest elk populations were already dwindling. Intensive hunting and the clearing of forests for agriculture fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. As Viking settlements expanded, encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare. Medieval sources began to describe them as creatures of the remote wilderness, seldom seen near human settlements. But these forest giants weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers swam another unexpected powerhouse, one that proved just as valuable and equally dangerous: the gray whale. Today, spotting a whale feels like a rare and wondrous sight. But for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone. Hunting them, however, meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters, where their distinctive feeding behavior made them both visible and vulnerable. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. That's roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on those Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse daons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique among the cetaceans Vikings encountered was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, gray whales were bottom feeders, plowing the seafloor for small invertebrates and creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence from coastal North settlements shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat, alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats, using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devilfish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate, females typically give birth to just one calf every 2 years, set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme: the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan, but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 cm at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kg. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era Deons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I've always been fascinated by how the Vikings interacted with the natural world. What animals did they encounter, and how did those encounters shape their culture and their fate? It turns out that wolves held a complex place in the Viking world, embodying both threat and opportunity. They were enemies because they attacked livestock, but they were also respected for their hunting skills, qualities the Vikings themselves valued. Archaeological digs from early Viking settlements have turned up wolf bones bearing cut marks, clear evidence that these newcomers were hunting wolves almost immediately. For the Vikings establishing colonies in the British Isles, wolves were a problem, especially attacks on sheep, so vital to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides. But Viking warriors also admired the wolf's hunting skills and pack coordination, qualities they themselves prized in battle. This complex relationship shows up in Norse place names scattered across former Viking lands in Britain. Places like Ulvadale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire all mark areas where Norse settlers frequently crossed paths with these predators. Even rune stones discovered in northern England depict wolf hunts, hinting that these dangerous pursuits held ceremonial importance for warriors proving themselves in new territories. As Norse settlers mixed with local populations, they adopted and reshaped Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The link between wolf and warrior grew stronger, with berserkers sometimes said to wear wolf pelts instead of going bare-chested. Ultimately, it wasn't the Vikings who sealed the fate of British wolves, but their descendants. As Norse settlements evolved into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became the official policy. It started during the Viking Age, but sped up afterward. By the 15th century, wolves were gone from England. Scotland's last wolves held on until the 17th century, and Ireland's final wolf was reportedly killed in 1786. It was the end of a long lineage that had been around since the first Celtic settlers, through the Viking invasions and beyond. But the wolf wasn't the only striking creature the Vikings encountered. Imagine their surprise when they came across what seemed like living relics from a primeval age: Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These armored leviathans lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. They were living fossils, almost unchanged for over 200 million years. Once, they dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but sadly, they've now vanished from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon could grow truly enormous, with females reaching up to 10 feet long and weighing over 660 pounds. Their prehistoric look, with bony plates called scutes arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish. Most distinctive was their long armor-plated snout, with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly adapted for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from the river and sea floors. Their immense size meant that catching one was a big deal, important enough to show up in regional sagas. Several Norse tales mention heroes wrestling armored river dragons. We've even found specialized sturgeon spears in Viking settlements, with detachable heads designed to pierce the fish's tough exterior. It shows just how valuable these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond the meat, sturgeons offered many valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine and making a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint problems. And most prized of all was sturgeon roe, caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. Sadly, by the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already declining in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, females don't mature until 15 to 20 years old, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Their predictable spawning runs and habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes, and pollution made things even worse. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had become so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, but it was too late to save them. As the Vikings moved inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest. The European bison, also known as the wisent, and its forest-dwelling cousin. Unlike the American bison we know today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 6.2 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy, dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could move between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically charge. I often think about the Viking hunters facing down a European bison. Imagine the sheer force of that animal, charging at 40 kilometers an hour through the dense woods. A single charge, the sagas say, could wipe out an entire hunting party. These weren't just beasts, they were landscape-defining creatures. By the late Viking Age, though, their populations were already dwindling. It's a somber truth that the Viking world was vanishing even as they explored and settled. Intensive hunting and deforestation pushed these magnificent animals into isolated pockets. Unlike the aurochs, the European bison narrowly escaped extinction. A small population survived in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus. About 7,000 descendants still live there today. They are, in essence, a direct link to the forest giants the Vikings once hunted. It's sobering to consider that the creatures that defined the Viking landscapes were already fading into memory, pushed to extinction by the same human expansion and climate changes that fueled the Viking Age itself.